Rachel. Hello, how are you?
Hi, Train. I am well today. It's nice to be back. It's been a little too long. I feel like I missed a month here or there connecting
I
with you. Life
know,
has
I
been a
know.
little hectic, a little wild, unfolding as always, but all in all, things are going well.
Yeah, it's you. I think you begin to realize how busy life is once you start to say, okay, January is gone, February is gone, March?
Hmm.
March is gone, April is gone. I'm losing track of I'm getting old. I'm so old. Oh my
I
God.
feel
I
you.
don't
It's
know.
like I can't even remember the months anymore, let alone which I'm in. Yeah, no, I
I
get it.
know. Could you imagine it's 2024 at the time we're recording this, and as we discussed, it's halfway through the year, and here we are.
Here we are. Yeah. Yeah, I know the marching on of time. I've been thinking a lot about that lately, actually. It's been at the top of my mind, how ethereal life is. We're all heading to the same end game, if you will, and the same conclusion is there for us all. And yeah, just kind of thinking about with that awareness, how sometimes my attachment to things needs to loosen up. um the marching on of time. I think a lot like there's this beautiful little garden across the place and even my garden in my backyard. Um and it just is ever changing and new constructions happening or new things are being built and um 10 years from now, who knows? It might not even be there. It might be a condo, right? Or something like that. And so trying to find places of appreciation for the things that I have and the things that I can enjoy in my life right now.
I'm the same way. One thing that I realized when both my parents got sick, I think we shared this last time,
Yeah.
was that's how I think you realize you're getting older when people around you start getting sick and people start passing on.
Yeah.
Like I can't remember many people dying in my 20s, but now like my mid 30s and I'm starting to get a little bit older. I'm like, okay, this person's sick, that person's sick, I'm sick.
Mhm. Mhm.
And as you mentioned, like you start to look around and you realize, okay, things are a little bit different. I know here in Toronto, Canada, it seems like the world has changed at a faster pace ever since the lockdowns of 2020.
Yeah. No, I think that's really fair. Yeah. And here in the States, we're facing this effing election. Like, get me started on that, right?
Yes,
Like,
yes, I forgot
what kind
about
of world am
that.
I going to be living in another year? Oh my God. So, right, that's really wild. And yeah, I mean, there's this way when I think about the pandemic, it's like, did it happen? Did and this like there's a part of it that feels really surreal. Like we lived that life, we walked through that, we were really doing that. And I was watching I have this girlfriend who's obsessed with the Real Housewives, and so I've agreed. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna watch one season of this. And so she got me started. I was like on the New Yorkers, right? So I'm watching it. And it's from a time ago. It's like so there are scenes where they're wearing their masks and they're doing their thing. And now it's like it's marked in time, like in our media, in our television, in our movies. Like, how wild is that? And yet we lived through it. Not everyone, I know. Condolences to those who lost people during that time. I mean, I did too, but it's kind of wild the resilience. But I mean, Tareen, don't you trip out like sometimes about like there will be a moment in time when there's no more humanity? Like there's just none. Like we'll get there. I think we'll get there. But I was thinking the other day, like 2024, for people who were living in like the 1300s, 2024 was like a dream state. Like, what? And so I try to put myself in that same mindset of like the year 3000 and like, whoa. And again, like, what is this little corner of the world where I'm living and the little mark that I'm going to make? And that bring it's gotten me thinking a lot, which I think we start to do as we get older too. Like, what is the mark that I want to leave? What's the legacy that I want to what's the imprint that I want to have? What's the impact that I want to have? And but at the same time trying to be a little detached from it because of all of the billions of people in the world, we probably remember 1% as far as we think about like historical figures, the people who end up on like in the history books. Um, and I used to feel like I needed to strive towards that. I needed to somehow create something that was so endurable. And I think I'm less of that mindset these days. It's more like I'm going to live my little life. I'm going to make the little differences or big differences, that I can make, but not be too attached to what happens to it from there. Does that make sense?
It does because I was thinking of Legacy maybe last year. And one thing
Hmm.
I thought was growing up, I thought Legacy was it was a creation, right? But to me, when I was very young, creation was through your children. But as I got
Hmm.
older, I realized, okay, creation can be a body of work, a painting,
Mm.
right? A tool, a service of being service, like how you're of service to people, right? So I began to expand my definition of creation when it came to legacy. And I said, okay, if I'm not going to have children, which I'm not, how can how
Yay,
can I?
welcome to the No Kids Club.
I know, right? My
Yay.
grandmother's like, am I going to be a great grandmother? I'm like, this is my brother and sister, but not for me,
Yeah, not for
right?
me.
So when I look at it, I was like, okay, what can I create? If it's not going to be children, what can I create to
Hmm.
leave
Hmm.
the world? And to be honest, what if it was something as simple as creating memories in others that they pass along to other people?
Yeah, yeah, I dig that. The other day, I was working with my graduates, and one of them, just as we were starting to wrap up, says, I just want to say, as a wrap up, that I'm really thinking about how one person's healing can have such impact, and sometimes you don't even see it. And so she was saying, Rachel, in working with you, I was able to come into this place where I'm now able to talk about my experience of sexual trauma. I'm able to be more embodied, more confident. And as a result of that, she's stepped into taking on a role in her community where she's helping them, understand. She's creating events for like prevention and awareness. And unfortunately, in their town, they recently had a teacher um, be exposed for being, abusing the kids in the school. And so she like hopped to it and, created this conversation for the parents and the facilitator, the people at the school. And then I thought about that later, how like on first level I was thinking, oh yeah, like my work with her, impacted her life and that's so lovely. But then I thought, but now she's impacting this community and then now she's impacting maybe even the way the school deals with this, and the systems that they now set up to try to prevent, which then will impact kids coming up for generations. And I just got teary-eyed, Tareen, really thinking about that, like how like all these kids potentially being um safer because of this trickle down effect. And yeah, so legacy is such a trip because it's sometimes something we don't even get to see necessarily and the ways that the kind of those waves trickle out. um and I think all people are doing that all the time, right? When we um just are kind to our fellow human beings, or we show up for each other, or we make memories and have good times with each other. It doesn't have to be, intense stuff, just, a fond memory.
Yeah, it's like going from like let's say a family tree, which is your
Huh.
biological descendants, and then you have the friendly tree where it's like your friends and your acquaintances, and they're all bearing
Yeah.
the fruits of Rachel in that way. And
Mhm.
I think that's a fantastic way to do legacy because more and more people are not having children that way. So how can you leave a
Yeah.
lasting effect? And this is someone that you worked with. There's an impact there. Now they're going and impacting positively their community.
Yeah.
And there is like that trickle down, as you mentioned, from Rachel to this person, from this person to the community. And who knows, generation one, generation two, generation
Hmm.
three. And I think that's a fantastic, fantastic way to create legacy.
I do too. And I mean, you're in that same camp, right? The work you're doing, the impact that you're having, the lives that you're touching. And so, yeah, it's kind of a cool thing to sit and trip off
It is. It is. I
sometimes.
remember
So,
someone, some who was it? I forget who. I do apologize to the person who shared this, but someone who they're not a friend, but they're like more of acquaintance, and we have like we talk here socially, online and
mm,
through email. And she shared that, and she asked me the question, "How long have you been doing this?" And I said, "It's been 2.5 years. I used to do it back when I used to take videos. This is before you and I met, Rachel. I used to do
mm,
it from my backyard on only sunny days. So from like May
ah,
to about September, right? Winter, I was like, nope, no interviews. But she shared that she shared some of the things that I do with her family, and they were
Hmm.
listening to this. And then the woman I work with, I just got an email today. They're saying that, hey, can you do a presentation? We really wanted you to speak to like a larger group of women. And I feel proud because there's a lot of people out there that sometimes they look at what we do and there isn't the conversation between men and women. Like women are having it here, men are having it here,
Hmm.
but a lot of times they're not having it together. So to be asked by someone who's a female to speak in front of women, I feel very, very honored. And that's my legacy in a way.
Yeah, cheers to that. I love that a lot. Oh my goodness. And besides, you have a baby, you never know what kind of baby you're gonna get. They might not even want they might not be a
Oh
good
my God.
legacy.
I know, right? You might have
They're
to,
unpredictable.
it's,
Oh my goodness.
it's crazy. It's crazy to see that, because I love, being like that uncle, that godfather,
Hmm.
that like stuff like that. Not mafia, ladies and gentlemen, just the godparent. But I have the pleasure of saying that, okay, I've done my couple of hours. It's like work. Okay, I've done my work.
Yeah,
I'm gone.
that's right.
You know?
Yeah, I can't remember if I've told you this before, but my background is in childhood education and I worked as a teacher, right, in preschool and elementary school. And then I worked as a nanny for 9 years. So I've had my babies. Those are my little surrogate babies that I raised up. But you're exactly right. I could go home at the end of the day, and kick back. I wasn't having to worry about paying for college or those things. And yeah, I mean, absolutely. We can have so and I have tons of, nephews and great nephews. So you're right. Like we get these opportunities to parent. In fact, I was just talking with my nephew the other day and they're going through the whole like they've just bought a house. So now how do we manage our finances? I was like, all right, well, we're gonna have a little Zoom meeting and let's talk about budgeting, right? So there are lots of ways that we can parent, if you will. Um, and with the people in our lives. And yeah, so that's been lovely. That's been on my mind a lot. I've also been thinking a lot about just relationship and friendship and really trying to think. I get hung up a little bit sometimes because I'm single again at 47. Lord have mercy. And, what
That's
is that going to
perfectly
be?
fine. The internet will make fun of you, but you know what? You're fine.
I
Let's
am
just say
fine.
you're
I am
single and
fine.
free.
Single and footloose and fancy free, and thinking a lot about how this is the first time in my life where I have a combination of prosperity and peacefulness and self-reliance. In my life train, I've always been super self-reliant, and not in the way of like keeping people out of my life, like I'm going to do it all on my own. I mean, that was a little bit of it when I was, really deep in the trauma that I experienced, but essentially like regardless of what chaos was happening around me or in my relationships, I was able to adult, right, pay the bills, keep the house clean, manage, to go to work and that kind of thing. But there was a lot of my life where while I was thriving in that way, there was chaos, there was disruption, there was pain, or there was wounding, or there was just work to be being done, healing trauma kind of work, which can be very intense. And this is the first time in my life where I have kind of all of those things lined up together, where I'm not stressing about finances. I am taking good care of myself. And then I have kind of this spaciousness and this peacefulness to settle into, like a little bit of a quietness that I've not had a lot of in my life. And so I was like, yeah, I think I need to just enjoy that for a little while, really absorb that and take that in. And I start to understand more. I've heard people say this before, like, my peace is the most important thing to me, like that, as I'm not willing to sacrifice that for anyone or anything. And I think I'm learning that lesson at this stage in my life in a really deeper way than I've really had it before.
I had a relationship end last year, 2022. And that
Mm,
person used to rob me of my peace. And even I know some people are like, Terrain, you know what? Probably when you're with her, things are perfect. Yeah, things are okay, especially in the beginning, like
mm,
always, right? Then when the
sure.
mask falls, it's like, oh my God, here we go. So when I used to bring this up with this person, she understood, but the strange thing about it, Rachel, is that she would purposely do it, like spitefully, it was
That
like
sucks.
that, right? And the reason being is similar to you. I would share that, okay, my peace is my most important part of my life. So if I were to be with someone, I'd say, okay, if I'm at 90% today, the person I'm with, I don't want you to bring me up to 100%. I can work on that myself. Just don't be the reason why I'm at 90% instead of 100, or bring me lower. So when
That's
things
good.
weren't necessarily going right in the relationship, she would use that knowledge now to her advantage. Okay, I know this is going to bother him and trigger him and all these other things. But as I exited out of that, and then I began to do a lot of self reflection over the years since that, I began to realize that sometimes I've given the people the power to take away my peace. And that's
Yeah,
part of my responsibility as a person,
100%.
right? So
I get
I can
that.
go out there and say that, okay, I can control all of that, but we can't control the world unless we're going to lock ourselves up in our little bedroom and, and just hide away. So I can see how as we get older, peace is more important, because if we're not at peace, there's stress, there's anxiety, and that's going to cause a whole bunch of issues. But like you, I realize how important it is in my
Mm.
singleness, right? Versus being in a relationship and trying to navigate it accordingly.
Yeah, no, I hear that. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, it's such an interesting thing, to be at this stage in my life. It feels very different for sure, of course, than when you're single, when you're, after a breakup, when you're in your 20s or in your 30s. But there's a lot to gain and plenty of opportunity for me to look at what is it that I want to craft. And I was thinking the other day that, we've tried to sometimes we put ourselves into the future because there are still some question marks for me up about this person. Like, are we going to be friends? Are we going to come back together in that kind of way? Or maybe somewhere down the road is because he's definitely going through his own like discovering himself journey and like growing up journey. Like, would he become somebody who we could circle back to and reconnect with? Yada, 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 just all of that future thinking. And it struck me the other day that I think we use that to a certain extent to try to soothe ourselves in the present moment, right? Like it can be, future tripping has a lot of negative connotation. And I think there can be a lot of pitfalls there. It can create a lot of anxiety, negative anticipation, pull us out of our experience, in the present moment, but had never had that thought before, how sometimes we're giving ourselves this idea that, oh, maybe it'll work out, or maybe something will happen, or to try to come back to a place of almost like soothing and nurturing ourselves in the present.
I've given a second opportunity to an ex once. And I've
Hmm.
done that because I felt that at the time that maybe I didn't give it my 100% when it ended initially,
Mm-hmm.
but it ended like within a few months.
Yeah.
But that was a way of me, maybe to your point, soothing the situation.
Mm.
And I think a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people do that. Like when I hear stories, like when some of the women, even the men share, they say that, well, we can get back together at a later time. Usually when they're saying that, if I were to ask the question, it's like, well, that's helping me not necessarily move on, because I know that there's always the possibility. And I sometimes chuckle when women say it, but from a male perspective, is there's a lot of men out there that think once they're intimate with you, they will always have access to you. That's why they're always willing
Mm.
to see what's going to happen down the road. So I'm not saying a clean break. Like I'm friends with one of my exes, even though she ended up on drugs now, so maybe that's why she wanted to be friends with me still. But
Oh.
she's going through what she's going through. But I
Mm.
would love to at least be friendly
Mm.
with them, right? But we don't necessarily have to go out and have drinks and things of that nature.
Sure. Yeah. Point in fact, I'm not friends with any of my exes. This is the first person where I even kind of like allowed the idea.
There's
Like,
always the
nope.
one. There's always one.
And there's always the one, right, that just wants to hang around or hold on. I mean, it was, 9 years and it's still pretty fresh. So we'll see. I think I do that. I think I do hold the idea with, the other long-term relationship that I had. We had always said in that relationship, oh, we'll always be friends no matter what happens. And, gave that a go. But for me, my experience was, well, now that I'm not um connected with you intimately, sexually, not trying to build a life together, the things that you do that bothersome are really bothersome, right? Like it's almost like you start to, you know, exactly, like the things fall away, right? And you start to see through and see. And so it's like, I don't even really enjoy being connected with you as friends. And so, right, it just drifts away and falls off. And so
The
life.
stardust is not in your eyes anymore, madam. I can see
Yeah.
clearly now the rain is gone.
Yes. Oh my Lord.
You know what's interesting? Like, have you ever asked yourself, like, after like that sexual emotional connection is gone, you ever sometimes look back and been like, I this was the point in the relationship where it should have ended, but you
Oh,
extended it.
gosh, yes. I mean, particularly with my marriage, I mean, I was 18 when I met him, so so young. What did I know? But yeah, there is a very clear moment. Well, I mean, just the very fact that I wasn't being faithful in the relationship, that I was seeking comfort elsewhere should have been a signal, right? And then this experience that I had with him where we decided we were gonna, you know, give it another try, but he wanted me to call the guy and let him know, right? Cutting that off. I'm not going to see you anymore. And he insisted on being there for that phone call. And the energy of it was very much like I'm like almost like an overlord. That's just like an extreme idea, but it felt a little like that. Like he's like over me, like why, like, you know, and these like glaring eyes. And yeah, when I look back at that, I think, gosh, yeah, we should not have made it past that moment. We really should have stepped away as soon as that occurred. And, you know, hindsight's 2020. I know that now. I didn't know that then. I really just wanted to be in love. And, you know, there were things about this person that I truly adored and appreciated. Um, but that carried on, you know, for 10 years. And um, you know, found myself in, you know, a really sticky situation with him and hard to get away. There's a point where you start to just hope that something will happen to get you back on track, right? Particularly because, you know, most relationships start out lovely, right? Like we fall in love, we see the best. You know, there are things that tie us to the other person. And, um, you know, I think that's a big part of healing from trauma is learning how not to bypass those signals. And how to trust yourself and trust your intuition, but then also act on it because that I think is the harder part. Yeah, go ahead.
No, what I was gonna say is that we don't know how broken we are until we leave and we try to
Oof.
engage in something else, right? And
Yeah.
one of the downsides of that is that if we don't fully heal, we can bring the trauma to that other person, and we're introducing chaos in their life where it's unfair to
Mhm.
them in a lot of ways. So, like you're saying, like we could, because I look back and as I got lately, I've done a better job of saying, okay, this is like either a red flag, a big one, non-negotiable, or a trigger. And I've been able to quickly identify it, right? But I remember before, like I used to have like relationships. I used to have multiple 2 years, 3 years relationships. And I look back and they should not have lasted that long, but you don't know what you don't know. And now you're
Yeah.
looking back and you're like, oh my goodness, that was the point. That was the point. And it's like the world saying, hey, something isn't right. But if you don't listen to me, I'm going to make you feel it. Then you're
Oof.
going to
Come on.
leave, right? And then when that
Yeah.
happens, it's like, wow.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Uh, yeah, I think one thing I have gained from this journey is that I have part of I think my value set is to forgive radically, to love radically and forgive radically. And I value that. I think that's a good idea. I think that is, um, yeah, something special. But I also am learning that I have to temper it. I have to temper it with accountability, right? Because otherwise, you know, I just allow and allow and allow, and then find myself in a position where, you know, I've given in too much, you know, and I've exactly as we're naming. I've just skipped, the memo. No, I put it in the shredder. What?
I'm not listening
You
to
know.
you today. So, Rachel, like before we close, so what do you want to tell people out there that's, find themselves in difficult situations? The writing's on the wall, but for some reason they just can't read it, or maybe they're even ignoring it because the devil that they know is always easier to deal with than the devil
Mm,
that they don't know, right?
for sure, for sure. Gosh, that's so tough. It feels so layered. I think, I'm actually just working on the next Thrive Tribe workshop. I'm not sure when this conversation is going to come out, but this next one is coming out in August of 2024, where we're going to talk about discernment and trusting others. And, um, you know, ultimately, there has to be, I'll be just very honest, I've never left those relationships. I've never actually had that part of me that said, okay, I'm the one who's done and I'm going to leave. Except for, I guess, to a certain extent, this last one. That was definitely a bigger lesson for me this time around of standing my ground, being able to stand my ground, to say, this is what's required. And if you're not available for that, if you're not up for that, we're done. And I guess, yeah, this is the first time I've done that. And really what it came to for me of being able to step into that more fully and wholly was just a deep awareness that, kind of going back to what we were talking about, I am sacrificing my peace. I'm sacrificing myself. And I've come way too effing far for all of that at this point in my life. And I think ultimately that is where the switch flips for people. You just have to see that, the costs are outweighing the payoffs. And while we can even continue to love and hope for someone, and, it's not like he's a terrible bad person. He's just a human being. He's trying to find his way and is making mistakes, but the mistakes you're making are having a negative impact on me. And so go get your shit together. And while you're doing that, I'm gonna be over here. So I don't know if there's any real answer in that other than just encouragement and empathy, because I understand it can be really hard to advocate for ourselves, to believe in our deservingness. But when we can tap into that and tap into it fully, then we can demand more of others and of ourselves.